And if anybody does have any questions, I know it's not being on YouTube right now, but after in the when it's put on live, just email planning.assistant@ektownship.ca if you have any questions. I know this isn't live now, but if you have some later on, thanks for doing that. I'm going to ask for a motion for the adoption of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting agenda. Linda, second. Susan, thank you. Disclosure, pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none. Okay, thank you. A motion for adoption of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Was there any errors or omissions? No. Okay, Tom and Linda, thank you very much. Okay. So the first thing we have on the agenda, you have the whole thing. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things here. Concession 4, part lot 28 at 4304 and 4312 Kilkenny Road. There was a public meeting, and it's attached to the package. The public meeting was held before council on May 10th, 21. There was written comments received from the Township Fire Department and the Cataraqui Regional Conservation Authority, advising of no objectives to the application. If you recall, we had this during the December, I believe, December 17th meeting, and the severances were recommended by council on January 11th of 21. There's a bylaw that's been attached. It's on page 21. Melissa, is there any further comments or anything you'd like to add?
No, there's been no further comments received since the public meeting, and I don't believe there's any planning issues identified with the rezoning application.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Okay, could I get a motion then, please, to
I'll move we approve.
Okay, Mark. Seconder, Tom, thank you very much. Everybody in favor? Or all in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, now we'll go on to 6.2.
Did you abandon this cathedral?
Over there, I gotta get some air in it.
Go to 6.2, which is B49-21, which is a new lot. Concession 10, part lot 28, 29, and 30 at 10278 Dixie Road East. It's the Stevens property. And the purpose is to sever a 3.1 acre lot with 346.5 foot frontage on Dixie Road for residential use, and to retain 177 acres with 1,400 foot frontage with the existing residence at 10278 Dixie Road. There's a diagram on page 28 showing the application severances and that. The zoning for the property severed and retained is RU. The severed lot meets and exceeds the minimum required lot area and frontage for the RU zone, and retained lot meets and exceeds the minimum lot area and frontage on the RU zone for residential and agricultural use. There is no retained lands have some significant woodlands. Melissa, would you like to speak on the planning and please?
Sure. So the property is eligible for consideration. It hasn't had a severance since July 11th, 1988. It meets the 1 acre generally sought for in the official plan. With respect to the average density, which is generally 4 within a kilometer, this will be the 5th within a kilometer. However, it's quite a large size lot, and it hasn't had any severances since 1988, so it was deemed to be generally in keeping with that policy. We did calculate MDS. There was a former livestock barn that was to the west, about 500 meters. It's been converted to some living space. There doesn't appear to be livestock anymore, so that has been reviewed and doesn't seem to be an issue. And the Director of Public Works doesn't have an issue with the new entrance in that location. So if the committee deems the application to be acceptable, there's a few recommended conditions of approval from staff. One, the Cashaloo standard parkland fee. The second, road widening across Dixie Road East. So there's 33 feet to the center line if it is required. That the balance of taxes are paid to date, and that any conditions are fulfilled at the expense of the applicant. That's everything.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. Is there any questions from the committee? And I believe there's no representative for this property. So if I could have a motion on this application, Tom, second, Barb. Thank you. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. The next application we have is 6.3. And I believe this is, it's for a new lot. It's concession 3, part lots 7 and 8 at Kitley Township. It's 820 Kitley line 3, Popplewell property. I believe Mr. and Mrs. Popplewell are not available, but it's Don Bennett that's representing them. It's the sever 180-acre lot with 1,150-foot frontage on Kitley line 3 for a residential farm use lot, and to retain 64 acres of the lot, 525-foot and 100-foot frontage with the existing residence at 820 Kitley line 3. There's a diagram on P35. If the committee recalls, just as a reminder, I believe maybe 1 or 2 years ago, there was a severance on this property, severed off on the east side of this property. The severed and retained lots meet and exceed the minimum lot area and frontage required in the RU zone for residential. The severed and retained will be RU zoning. There are significant woodlands. Severed lands are all within significant woodlands, 120-meter adjacent lands at the rear of the retained lands. Okay, Melissa, would you like to speak on the official plan and the policy statement, please?
Sure. So yeah, as you indicated, there has been one lot that has come off the lot property in 2015. It's kind of at the end of Driver Road, but there is eligibility for one further lot since the eligibility date of July 11th, 1988. The lot obviously meets the minimum 1 acre lot size sought in the official plan. So with respect to average density, staff had suggested to the applicant that they come to the committee on a preliminary basis just because of the density count. So again, it's generally 4 within a kilometer. There's currently 5 existing, and this will be the 6th within a kilometer. However, it's quite a large size lot, and they are creating another farm lot that's could be used for farm. That's 80 acres. It also has some split frontage, so it has a bit of a perception of being almost a separate lot. There's been a lot of historical development on Kitley line 3. I'm not really sure how rural that area appears. Anyway, staff had recommended that they come prior to filing just to kind of gauge how the committee would feel about this application. So they paid the $200, which if the committee is supportive of the application, they would just have to pay an additional $200. So it doesn't cost them anymore, and they'll get some feedback from the committee if they decide to formally apply. The severed lot is all within the significant woodlands area. So it would be suggested that the applicant consult with the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority about an environmental impact study. There might be opportunity to do a scoped one with the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority that they could do with them, or they could recommend that they use a consultant. The RVCA has been quite good to work with people and try to do scoped ones where it's at all possible. So we would recommend that they touch base with them to see if that's an option, and then it wouldn't really cost them too much money because they'd be doing it with the Conservation Authority. Doesn't seem to be any barns in the area that are concerned, and I did send the sketch to the Director of Public Works, and he had no issue with the entrance location. So should the committee find the application acceptable and wish it to proceed directly to council if it gets formally filed, I did suggest a few conditions for the committee's consideration. One, again, being the standard cash in the parkland fee. Two, being the standard road widening along Kitley Line 3 if it's not already sufficiently wide. Three, that there's a favorable environmental impact study or a scoped one possibly done with the Conservation Authority, and that the balance of taxes are paid to date, and that any conditions are fulfilled by the applicant's expense. So yes, and I believe Mr. Bennett is here to speak on behalf of the Papa Wells.
Thanks, Melissa. Before I ask the committee, Mr. Bennett, is there anything you'd like to add or comment prior to the committee discussing?
You'll have to figure out how to mute.
You'll just have to unmute, please. Again.
I believe I've got it. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for considering the application. Yeah, the applicant unfortunately can't be here himself because he's scheduled for his COVID vaccine at the same time. So he asked me to represent him on this. But all of the conditions that you placed for PAC consideration, I don't think there's any objection to any of those things. Really, the question is, if he were to meet all of these requirements and we file formally, is that something that would be acceptable to the committee? And do you think it would be passed?
We'll discuss it, and then you'll hear the answer once we're finished here. And then Melissa will give you the next instructions that she's for what you have to do. So does anybody have any questions on it or for Mr. Bennett then, or discussion?
I do.
Yes, Linda.
Will we get a copy if this goes through? Will we end up getting a copy of the environmental impact study
Yes,
for our review?
yes.
Yes, I can certainly bring it back to the committee. I'm not sure there's much urgency either to the application going directly to council, especially if it needs an environmental impact or a scoped or something with the Conservation Authority. So with that being the case, it might be good to bring it back just in case there's any recommendations or something that do come out of it. Hopefully it's nothing, but you never know.
Right.
That's
We
just a- no.
this we can get on the first process here at least. Okay, Susan, and then Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I was just going to say, it sounds pretty straightforward, except for the environmental study. And even if it did go to council and they had to follow what the environmental study said, we could still pass that pending them doing that. And it would just keep things moving. What's everybody else think? I mean, really, Melissa has said that it's depending on the environmental study. And if they can bump it or whatever it was she meant, meaning do it quicker with them and cheaper, let's do it. And if there's nothing, then move it along instead of just like back and forth, because it costs time and money for everybody to go back and forth. If it goes to council and it's approved, pending the environmental study, then it's done. I mean, we wouldn't even have to get involved with it again. Just my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom?
I'd be okay with the with it moving forward under the conditions Melissa set out there too. The if everything goes through on those conditions, I'd be okay with it.
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, I couldn't find the raised hand function on the thing here. I know the property well. Ellie and I, we've worked the property directly to the left, the farm next door, basically. So I spent a lot of time going back and forth past this on tractors and so on. There's no significant forest in there, so I don't think that's really an issue to be concerned about. That's pretty high stony ground there. Any bush in that area is not a problem, especially out at the front where the proposed house location would be. It's pretty high and dry. So there's not a lot there. So I have no issues with it. Just, we should really be careful about referring too much to these as viable farm properties. The reality is 60 or 80 acres of that kind of ground, you're not going to make a living at it. So just don't view it as such. If they want to sever it, I have no particular issues. It'll simply be one more house along that stretch of road, one more mailbox to dodge, but we'll manage somehow. So I'm okay with it.
Yes, Barb.
I just had a different question. I'm not understanding if you're only allowed to have a certain number of driveways within a certain amount, why we're okay with them exceeding it. I know we've done this before, and I've not been clear on why it's okay.
I can give you my opinion, but I'll let Susan go first. As Mark, you said, you're familiar with it. I'm familiar with it because personally, my in-laws live next door. For over 50 some years, I've been going there, so I'm very familiar with the property. So I agree with you. It's not quite a farm.
I was just going to say that it's probably a discretionary thing. And if it was a windy, twisty road, like similar to the one I live on, you probably wouldn't have any sight lines to put another one here. But I'm not familiar like the other people here are with the road, but it would be a discretion thing, I would think. We should have some kind of discretion. And I believe if Melissa is saying this is one of them, that's the way we go. Thanks.
I'm more concerned from a policy perspective, and when someone else comes to the table and we say no, and they say, well, it was okay here, we should have some record of why it's okay. And I'm
just wondering
why it is.
I'm just wondering if it's a cut and dry policy or a guideline. Remember, we had that discussion before.
I'll ask Melissa, Tom, and I'm sure that she'll be able to answer it. And if you have any questions, we'll come back. Melissa, can you?
Yeah, so, well, the policy says generally 4 within a kilometer. So it has been somewhat discretionary with the committee. I know we mostly often go to 5, especially if there's not a lot of severance activity. Because it was the 6th, this is why I did recommend that it come to the committee on a preliminary basis, because from a staff perspective, 6 might be too much, but again, it's a large lot. Kitley Line 3 has had a lot of historical development. It doesn't look that rural, and it's got some split frontages. So, you know, it's kind of a hard call. So that's kind of why I wanted to come to the committee to see what their take is. So it definitely is a subjective, because it does say generally. So if the committee feels that there's reasoning and rationale for providing, you know, up to 6. I mean, sometimes if it's a dead end road, 6 is good too, stuff like that. So there's definitely some, and if it hasn't had severances, now this one has had a severance, but it is a large lot. I mean, if it was a 5-acre lot and they were creating another one and it was going to be the 6, you know, that might be a tougher sell. But because it's such a large lot, it's creating an 80-acre parcel, not very good farmland, but a large parcel, you know, it's not going to have the ability to sever again either. Now it's out of severances because it's reached its maximum under that policy. So so that's kind of why I was hoping to feel at the committee to see how you felt about, because I guess the number, it's like a variance. The number is not a number. It's not math. It's kind of with everyone, and you do need to justify it, as you said. So anyway, that's all.
Yeah, I know history. I'll come back to you in a second, Tom. I know history, you know, Susan, you mentioned about moving it on and everything. We've had historically over the years that I've been on the committee, where people have approached the committee to get guidance, and sometimes it helps them change their ideas or gives them which directions they should go. But generally speaking, it does speed things up, and they may see something different or hear something during our conversation. So I don't think it's going to make it any faster, any slower, because we do have to wait our hands tied because of the report that we require. So I think sometimes it's a good idea to have these discussions and coming back, because things could change. So Tom, I know you had your hand up, so.
I just
through you, Chair, to Barb, it's a great question to ask, and it's there's been times in the past where if you've taken like an infill lot where you've had, I think it was Blair Road, there's 20 houses on the one side of the road, but there was just one lot left in the piece, and it was done. But I think it is, you know what I mean, the generally is more used as a guideline, but that was a great question.
Well, I appreciate Melissa's explanation. I would think that from a record perspective, that the rationale for recommending that it be accepted should be included in the document so that there's no doubt about why we made this decision in the future.
Yes, Mark.
Just to finish that, and I think it's already been mentioned, but again, because I spend so much time driving up and down line 3 on a tractor, there's a fair amount of development already on line 3. So the purpose of the guideline in the first place was to not get a lot of essentially strip development down a road. It's already there. So one more entranceway isn't really going to change the character of line 3. It's already pretty urbanized. So it's not going to matter.
I agree, Barb, with what you're saying. I'm very much for policies and procedures, and I'm very much for what you're suggesting is that if we did it here, what do we have? What do we have here? And I think we have to look at each individual case. And as Mark said, that road, I'm very, very familiar with it. And it's a built up road. It's country, but not like Highway 29 or Highway 2 or something like that. And I think we have to look at each case on its own merits. And because of the situation, and I also agree with what Melissa is saying, is that because of the large acreages that are being severed on this parcel, it's you're talking 80 and 64 acres. So I think, yeah, that's some justification. It's not just a real busy, I call busy highway when I look at it. Right?
Mm-hmm. I would, now I'm not sure procedurally where this would come, but I would move acceptance with the condition that we add the justification, that we acknowledge that it is the 6th, but that due to A, B, and C, as Melissa identified, that the extra driveway is not a problem.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, so we have a motion from Barb, seconded by Mark. All in favor? Any more questions? Okay, all in favor?
I had a question.
Okay, Susan.
I just wondered if you could just attach the policy where and underline where it says discretion. Why do we have to go into detail? I mean, it doesn't matter to me if we do, and I can accept that motion, Barb. I just wondered if we attach that portion of the policy.
So my perspective on it is that saying discretion, when you go back and have somebody challenge it in order to further their request in the future, we wouldn't have anything to describe the rationale that was used. It's still discretionary, absolutely, but
Well, fair enough. We could go into it.
Yeah.
I just wondered. Yeah. But somebody will come back.
Yes, they will.
Yes, they will. So we're all in favor of that. Melissa, is there any questions that you might have on this? And then Mr. Ben, I'll come back to you in a second.
Okay, so just to clarify, so the committee is going to recommend the severance subject to the conditions. Do you want it to come back, or I mean, I could definitely bring it back if there's something comes up in an EIS that's of concern and would require some consideration. But if the EIS says there's no issues, I mean, that's fine to go directly to. Okay, so then in the conditions, I guess we could put a note. We could put a note just saying that the committee considered the average density policy, where generally 4 And under this specific conditions of this severance, deemed that 6 would be acceptable in this particular case. Does that sound good? Okay, so we can put a note. So we'll do the conditions and then a note saying that you specifically considered it and felt under this circumstance it was deemed acceptable. Okay, just to, yeah, definitely give it that you gave it consideration and this is a site specific. Okay, that's good. That's good.
I think with the acreage size and the location.
Okay. Acreage location, okay.
You know, is a big thing. So,
Okay.
Mr. Bennett, any questions from you or clarifications or anything?
No, I don't think so. It was a very enlightening and interesting debate. A lot of different perspectives came out there, but I thought it was very well considered. I would just like to hear, I guess, the final wording of the motion so I understand it correctly. But if I were to paraphrase the decision that I believe you guys have arrived at is, if we meet the conditions spelled out in the committee report, the council would be in favor of approving this, assuming, of course, and the one stickler out there was the environmental impact assessment. With respect to that, there was some comment made, and I thought accurately, that there's really no significant woodlands there, but the environmental impact assessment is still a requirement? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that is correct. Sorry, Melissa, you want to answer that? And then what we would do is our recommendation, correct me if I'm wrong on this, our recommendation would be that this would come forward to council and council would do the approval or not approval based on the information where the committee. Tom? Okay, Tom, you go ahead and then Melissa. Yeah.
I was just going to say there, I think in the conditions there, it was environmental impact or the scope from the RCVA. Was that not the case?
Melissa?
Comment on that. Just in reading that, like verbatim, it says a favorable EIS to be completed in relation to the severed lands to the satisfaction of the township of the Rideau Conservation Authority regarding significant woodlands and 120 meters. So what I read is it's not either or, it's an EIS to the satisfaction of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority.
Melissa?
Yeah, so yeah, so it is a policy requirement because it is in the significant woodland, so it does need to be considered. So it does say the recommendation is written, does say a favorable environmental impact study EIS, but there's different types of EISs. So it could be what's a scoped one, which is done with the Conservation Authority who works with the property owner, and they fill out a form and they do a site visit and that kind of thing, and it's a fairly straightforward assessment. Or it could be one that requires a consultant to do. We would rely on the Conservation Authority to kind of direct that, just because they have the environmental background that staff do not have. And in many cases, ones that relate to woodlands and just taking a little area for a house hasn't been a huge issue. But we would need them to evaluate it just to address it. So, I mean, we could say, reword the condition to say, if you want to put the scoped wording in it, but it would be the Conservation Authority that would make that determination. And hopefully, likely it is, but I would suggest that Mr. Popplewell reach out to the Conservation Authority before they apply, because the Conservation Authority does get circulated with all severance applications and they do comment on them. So that's going to come up anyway. So if he reaches out to them, he would at least have an idea if it's something fairly straightforward he can do with the RVCA, or if they're going to want him to have somebody engaged privately. I don't know how much these things cost. I don't think the EISs are too expensive wise, but hopefully it's just something fairly straightforward because it is just woodlands. And, you know, I know some members know the area well, and it doesn't appear to be too significant, but it is on the mapping and it is a policy. So we just have to, you know, just vet it through something. So, I mean, so yeah, so what would happen? So these minutes would go to council, including these conditions, if the committee is favorable. saying the Cashel Parkland, road widening, and then the favorable environmental study. I could put a note in it saying whether a scoped EIS or a consultant EIS, if you want the wording in, but they're both EISs, whether they're done by, the property owner or whether they're done by a consultant. So that's what would happen. So the comments would go to council with the minutes. And then when it actually got formally filed, these conditions would then go to the county. So, and again, if something came up in the EIS that triggered something further consideration by the township, then it would come back to the committee. But if the EIS, hopefully a scoped one, comes back from Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, then it's really nothing in that condition would be waived. It would be fulfilled. So really the starting point for Mr. Popple would be reach out to the Conservation Authority, and it very well may not be that, significant of an issue.
Thanks for clarifying that for me. That gives us a pretty straightforward path on where to go forward. Our biggest concern was with engaging in an expensive EIS with a consultant and then going nowhere despite having a favorable assessment. But
yeah,
it is an or situation. I just didn't understand that clearly enough when I read through it. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Okay, we've passed this in, so as Melissa said, it will go to council once you receive the report and that from the conservation. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for your consideration. Bye-bye for now.
Okay, bye. Okay, I guess now we'll go on to the land division decisions. The first one being 7.1, which is B 1520, 7116 Temperance Lake Road. Just stop me anytime there's any questions or you want to make a comment on them. The other one is the B 7.2, which is B 521 lot addition, 416 County Road 29. That was the McCurdy property. The next one is the correspondence on the 8.1 notice of decision of Miracle Wolford official plan on April 22nd of 21. Another one is notice of passing of zoning bylaw amendment Hall Orchards dated April 27th of 21. Are there any questions or anything? If not, could I have a motion that correspondence received and read? Susan? Hey, Linda, thank you. Is there any other business? Okay, seeing none, I guess our next meeting is Thursday, June 17th at 5 o'clock. I guess, Melissa, because we're not on YouTube and you're I don't know if you've got any questions or not, or comments in the future, maybe you could bring them up at the, I'm just throwing that out, the next meeting or something, if there was.
Sure, absolutely. There has been no emails received further to the social media notice that was put out, but I will, yeah, if anything comes in, I will forward it to the committee and then bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is there any, no other business? I'll ask for an adjournment then. Okay, Barb, thank you very much. Everybody stay safe and enjoy the golfing,
Stay
Mark.
safe.
Oh, sorry, Mark.
I don't golf, so I don't.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
Well,
Good
bye.
night.
Good night.
Bye.
Have a great